Do I have to do that whole thing again? Short version, welcome to the GWP Commission meeting. This is a special meeting that has been called to cover for a canceled meeting earlier in the month. Let's go ahead and start with the roll call.
Sure. Before I proceed with the roll call, and for the record, Commissioner Laurie and Commissioner Peterson will not be attending the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting. Roll call, President Fay,
Here.
Commissioner Karigian,
Here.
Commissioner Jasmadarian.
Here.
Thank you. Item number 2, Glendale Water and Power Commission and staff comments.
Any comments from my fellow commissioners?
I have no comments, thank you.
I have no comments. Thank you.
A couple things I wanted to mention is that I think in this packet, we did not have an agenda forecast. And so just want to point that out. I don't know if that was missing or if we have one printed here we can circulate.
Good afternoon, commission members. Because this is a special meeting, we normally can skip certain agenda items. So the future agenda schedule or calendar that is not included, the commission is more than welcome to discuss it, although it's not necessary because this is a special meeting.
Okay. Understanding it's not necessary, I do think it would be helpful, certainly for me and probably for the rest of the commission, that we're kind of looking ahead on a rolling basis. So I'd like to request or suggest that we just include that as a matter of course in future meetings, even if it's a special meeting and it's not required. Maybe there's an opportunity for the GWP staff to address some things that had been on a previous agenda forecast, but because of some meeting cancellations and dates, I don't think we covered them. One was a budget presentation that had been scheduled for early June. Maybe that's kind of old news because of where we are in the cycle. Maybe there's a short recap that you could provide over how that shook out if it's already been covered by the City Council. I'd appreciate that. Yeah, otherwise I think we can proceed.
President Fay, in response to the budget was just adopted last night, so we are planning on including that in the next presentation so that you have an adopted budget presentation versus a proposed budget presentation.
Okay, great. And our next meeting, we are not planning a meeting in early July because it's close to the 4th of July holiday. So our next regularly scheduled meeting is August 5th. Is that right? Okay, great. All right, with that, any other comments from staff?
No comments from staff. We can move on to the next item.
Item number 3, oral communication for 5 minutes. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to a speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer to the matter to appropriate staff for investigation and reports. We do not have any callers or any speakers at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 4, reports. 4A, summer energy assessment.
So we have Chief Valdez here for Integrated Resource Planning Administrator, who will provide a summary energy assessment report.
Yeah, thanks, Adrine, and good afternoon, President Fay and members of the Commission. So Chief Valdez here, Integrated Resource Planning Administrator for Glendale. So today I'm going to be presenting our 2024 summer assessment, or what we call the summer readiness. Got it. Yes. Yeah, so let's start off with the Climate Prediction Center seasonal temperature outlook for July, August, and September 2024. So we are anticipating above normal temperatures across much of the United States. So this trend is particularly pronounced in the western and southern regions. While this trend for the country is above normal temperature, you would see in here that the Pacific coastal region, where we are pretty much, might see a more moderate pattern. So however, in the inland areas of California, there is a likelihood of higher than average temperatures. This forecast is critical for us to consider as it directly impacts energy demand and the preparedness of our energy infrastructure. Prolonged heat can affect the efficiency of the plants and transmission infrastructure. So hotter and drier conditions impact those hydroelectric generation. The increased frequency of extreme weather events has made unexpected instances of high demand. So given the summer outlook, we must address the challenges and prepare our energy systems to ensure reliability and efficiency during these peak demand months. So our supply options include firm energy from Magnolia and Grayson, as well as from our long-term PPA or power purchase agreements, including Intermountain Power. We don't have it listed in here, the Hoover Dam, Palo Verde Nuclear, and those various renewable resources, contracts for renewable resources. Additionally, we also have bilateral purchases utilizing available firm transmission capacity. So we buy this firm energy in the forward market, day ahead, and real-time market. To meet our anticipated demand this summer, we're also considering generation or system contingent energy. So for example, we have Eland here. We're counting Eland, even if it's still in the test phase of Eland. So we're doing testing it started in late May, and that would end around September of 2024. I mean, like this summer. We will be getting we're supposed to get 25 megawatts from that one, but because of some issues, we're only getting 12, but we're counting that 12 towards our summer preparedness. LA will also be providing us contingent energy during the heavy load hours. That's from hour ending 7 to 22. From July, August, and September. So we also have the option to purchase from the CAISO non-firm energy. So furthermore, we leverage the new CAISO framework for establishing market scheduling priority for transactions that wheel through the CAISO balancing authority to serve external load like Glendale. So wheels that are backed by firm transmission to serve external load have higher priority than the regular wheel transactions that can get cut at any time. So signing up for this gives us the same priority as if Glendale is, the same as those load-serving entities in the CAISO. So here's our resource stack and how we plan to cover summer load with our current supply options. So the bars here are supplies, and the red line represents peak load. While we do not anticipate with certainty that the peak demand will be higher than our all-time high, we are still planning for 346 megawatt scenario this summer. So this year, we have increased or secured more energy and capacity than we did last year. We have Eland and additional LA contingent energy in our 2024 portfolio, resulting in a total of available capacity of about 340 megawatts. We're a little bit short, but we're in a better position than last year. Okay, so while our overall outlook for summer 24...
Excuse me.
I'm
Can
sorry.
I just ask a question about that last graphic?
Yes.
Since you mentioned the forecast, the climate forecast, how does the forecast for this year compare to the forecast or the actuals for last year and the year before?
Okay, so last year we were planning for, so last year we planned above 288 megawatts, but we were able to supply that energy. We only had I think, if I'm not mistaken, last year, it was about 300 megawatts, shy of 300 megawatts that we have in our stack, but we were planning for 331. Let me correct that one. We were planning on 331. We were a little short with that one, but our actual load came in at 288.
And that was the mild summer.
We
And- but
had a
the
mild summer last year.
Previous year in '22, that was another hot summer,
That
right?
was a really hot summer. That's when we had that 10-day of, of above 100 degrees.
So we're expecting this summer to be more like '22, right?
We are planning for that. Although, like I said, we cannot predict with uncertainty that we would hit that number. But at least, like with our resources, we're preparing for actually our all-time high.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. There you go. So again, like what we say, while our overall outlook for 2024 is an improvement from the dire supply condition of 2023, we must remain vigilant due to several risk factors that could impact our energy supply. So we have a bunch of, like we're looking at curtailments here, outages, reductions, price caps that are risks that we must prepare for. So our team is continuously monitoring the situation and implementing measures to mitigate these risks. It is crucial that our supply options are available in times of high heat events to preserve reliability. So while we're ensuring that we have enough supply is a critical part of our summer readiness plans, we also have plans in place to manage load and ensure local system reliability. So this includes a public outreach plan. We have a robust summer readiness program in place, and we also have the demand response programs ready to go. To improve system reliability, we also have completed the preventive maintenance and peak testing on Unit 9. We actually called on Unit 9 already last Monday when, like the weather was warm. So on the transmission and distribution side, they do implement this field switching to mitigate overloaded feeders. They also identify overloaded distribution transformers and replace them with larger ones. And at the same time, the conversion of distribution feeders from 4 kV to 12 kV initiative is ongoing. That's a short presentation. That concludes my presentation, and if you have any questions.
Thank you
I'm
very
here,
much.
and the staff are here as well to answer your questions.
Great. Would either of you like to ask any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Valdez, for the presentation. I do have some questions, just so that I understand, and maybe the public wants to learn also. So when you say test energy of Eland, what kind of test are you doing, or what is it, basically?
Okay, so right now, we just implemented the project. So before you could go to what they call like a commercial operation of the project, so we have to go through a testing period. So basically what they're doing is, there are several circuits of the facility. So that's the solar component and the storage. So they're testing it by phase, or what they call by conduit. And we're already getting that energy, like even if it is in the test period. The only concern that we have is it's because test energy, it could get curtailed at any time if they see any issue on the facility.
Right, okay. And the non-firm CAISO imports, I think I understand it, but you're trying to get a short-term firm wheeling from CAISO. Could you explain the difference for the
Okay.
public and myself as well?
Yeah, so normally for non-CAISO participants, we could actually participate in that market where we could buy energy from them. But since our load is not in there, the chances, if there is an issue with the system, we're gonna be the first to get cut. Of course, they're gonna serve their load first. So starting actually July of 2024, they implemented a new framework, or kind of like mechanism, wherein there is it's like a special priority. So they're saying that if you can support that wheel, meaning, like that import that you would get through the CAISO and get that one with a firm supply, then your the transmission will be firm for you. You will get that one. They're not gonna cut you first. So basically what would happen is that unless there is a stress on the system, you won't get cut, right? I mean, like you will get cut only proportionately with those that for the participants whose load are also in the system. So it's equal footing with CAISO SCs, basically.
So it sounds like we upgraded ourselves from for CAISO purposes, from second-class citizen to back first-class citizen, or normal like everybody else?
Like everybody else,
Okay,
right?
well, that's good.
Yes, and the advantage of this one, for us really, why are we doing this, right? We're doing this one because first we're trying to firm up this delivery to us, and it gives us an extra capacity on our transmission, because that frees up the transmission, because we already have transmission that's allocated for that resource. So now we're using a firm transmission through the CAISO, which relieves us of that equivalent transmission. So in reality now, like with this one, we were able to get 35 megawatts of transmission, free transmission. Not free, I mean, like, we will pay the CAISO for
Right.
that one.
Well, I mean, that's good news for us, and I know in the past this was a big issue, and good job for the staff for managing it and making it happen somehow, so good job.
Yeah, thank you, but these are short-term transactions, so it's not something that we could plan for like long-term.
Something's better than nothing, so that's
Yes.
how I'm seeing it.
That's correct, especially now that we have Grayson Repower.
Yeah.
Like, we need everything we,
Yeah. On slide 5, you had the supply risks and Elon curtailment, Grayson reduction, IPP shortage, Hoover limitations, reduced renewable. And I know you went through them pretty quick, maybe
Yeah.
assuming we know them, and I kind of understand them. But I think it's important for the public to be aware of all these
risk.
risks that are out there. So if you want, it's up to you whether you want to do it today or maybe later at some point, kind of explain what's the Elon curtailment. I understand it's the testing and that could end up. Grayson capacity reduction, we're building Grayson up, but we're still in the process and not there. IPP coal shortage, I don't know, so maybe you can say that.
Okay, so with IPP right now, because we are at the end of the coal project, so we're having issues now with coal supply. So most of our suppliers are sort of like backing out now of the project because they've already sold the coal somewhere else. So meaning, if we have shortage in coal, that means we have lesser production from the power plant.
And Hoover limitations?
Hoover limitations is that historically, because of the drought situation in the past, that Hoover is actually generating less historically. So that's what we're getting. We are seeing now less deliveries from Hoover power plant.
Even though we got more water and that should speed up?
Yes. So the trend is still going down.
I see. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that
that's
has
correct.
nothing to do with the water or it's a different reservoir. People see we've got plenty of water and they think Hoover, it's a dam, so we should have lots of electricity.
Yeah, that's correct. But if you see the forecast, that the heat is actually, like towards that side.
Okay.
So just a point of clarification. First off, Scott Nolan, Assistant General Manager, Power Management. The water system that actually feeds into Hoover is a series of lakes. And each of the lakes have different obligations for first fill levels and who they supply, their cities that get supplied from those water sources. Mead is kind of towards the end of that. Like Lake Powell is just before that. Lake Powell has to have a certain amount of water in it. So even if there is more rain, the obligations for supply of water all along that chain must be provided first before it actually gets to Hoover. The Hoover level has gone up a little, and by a little I mean, if we look at historical levels, it really hasn't gone up too much. It can support some generation because it has to have a certain level to push through the gen and turn it, but we're not seeing anything close to what we've seen historically. So there are quite a few interactions between those water supplies.
Okay. Well, thank you.
No problem.
So, Ms. Valdez, I don't want to go through each one of them.
Yeah.
Which one keeps you up at night?
Everything actually in here keeps me up at night. But the biggest one here is, like the biggest bar, right? Which is the transmission and generation curtailment and outages. So we are planning, like to have all this system available. But if transmission or the generation doesn't, if something happens to those, then we will have some issue.
Okay.
Because we're still depending on the transmission for most of our energy to serve our load.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
So just to follow on those risks, I think I'd like to know what you guys think about wildfire risk. This being a hotter than normal year plus following a wetter than normal year. That seems like a combination that adds to more fire risk, and we're already kind of seeing that early in the season. Even if it's not a wildfire here in Glendale, what are the risks to our system of wildfires elsewhere in California or around the West?
Can I defer to our wildfire guru in here? Yes, sir.
So Scott Nolan, Assistant General Manager. Wildfire, our translation of wildfire mitigation actually goes into transmission. So we would recognize an impact in our system by a curtailment of transmission or a cut in the transmission lines. So there is exposure on the Pacific DC. We've seen that in the past. It's actually exposure in many places on the AC system. But how it translates to us is curtailment of transmission or cuts on transmission. So that's kind of rolled in to all of our thought process here.
Gotcha. So that one's kind of captured under that curtailment umbrella. One of many causes that might lead to curtailment.
There's much depth to a lot of these issues that we try and explain it like kind of at a high level with you, but there's a lot more going on in the background. I'll put it that way.
Sure. On the ELIN testing, is there anything we can do to accelerate that so that we're through it before our expected kind of hottest day of the year? Seems like we're right on the edge, so.
Yeah, so we are actually working with LA on this one to make sure that we get the entire 200 megawatts as fast as we can. I mean, we do need this one, but they need it as well. They have a bigger share of this, right? It's a 200 megawatt project. We only have 25, so they have, like this, really a skin in the game on this one to make sure that it gets completed. But in addition to that, they also have other issues on their interconnection side that they're working on. Yes, the staff, we are continuously evaluating our options on how to make sure that we get our entire 25 megawatt share as soon as we can.
Los Angeles is kind of the big dog, the big customer that's driving that.
I'll add this. So there's actually two sides to this that are LA. It's LA, the transmission, and LA, the power source procurement. And what she was alluding to is they are working on a remedial action scheme, which has to do with managing special scenarios in the transmission system that may force them to curtail supply of energy. One of the issues that's come out of the fast development of renewable resources in the particular area that ELIN exists is that as these sources are coming online, they're creating issues with the supply of that energy in that local region. And it's creating issues on the transmission. So they have to plan for possibilities when they're looking at the grid capability. And they've developed a remedial action scheme such that if something occurs, they would have to curtail supply of that energy, and in some cases cut entirely. So we're actually going through the process of trying to resolve that outstanding issue with them because this is a new problem and, in all honesty, a problem they created, they being LA.
Kind of too much of a good thing, too much solar in the same, concentrated in the same
Well,
geography.
Too much energy resource at all on those particular lines, and they also have one line out that they're attempting to do repair work on at the same time. So it's a condition they've created, and it's having negative impacts on some development, and including this project that we're working on. So as much as we'd like to see that project come online sooner, in fact, it was supposed to have come online much sooner, it actually got shifted further out, and we're just lucky enough to have it coming back online now. We can't make it do what we can't make it do.
So we're a customer, but we're not controlling it. We're not really in the driver's seat on that one.
No, we're holding on to the tail end of the car.
Gotcha. Okay. This is all pretty dire. I appreciate that you guys are presenting this in a very professional manner, but this scares the crap out of me. If we go back to the bar chart, the little red line is actually above all of the squares. And
Yes.
I'm not misinterpreting, right?
No.
That's a big deal, right?
Yes, it is.
So, for anyone watching at home, don't freak out, but this is serious. And I think it leads to a couple ideas. We've been talking about distributed energy resources and other ways to help solve this problem. And I think this may provide a really interesting natural experiment where whatever we have to pay to buy the extra marginal energy from the CAISO, I'm glad we have access to that, but it's going to be really expensive. Right?
Yes.
Do we have an estimate of what that peak marginal
The
megawatt hour will cost?
The soft cap is, I think, currently set at 1,000, and I think they're discussing changing it to 2,000 a megawatt. I don't think it's been refined yet so that they're willing to accept 2,000, but the current soft cap is $1,000 a megawatt.
And did we pay anything near that 2 years ago during the last hot summer?
We did have one big buy. I'm trying to remember. Was it? I think it was in the 700 on one. I'll defer to you if you recall.
Yes, we have purchased about like $1,000 from the CAISO,
And
but for, like short time.
gotcha. So think of ways that we can kind of control our own destiny here a bit more. If we're willing to spend $1,000 a megawatt over there, if somebody offered me the equivalent to unplug my refrigerator for 4 hours, like I'd do it, or leave my house and go to the movies or something, go to a cooling center. Are we exploring that? I mean,
If I can get 25 megawatts for that $1,000, sure, that makes a lot of sense. But
yeah. So the
we're not
challenge is
seeing
we
that kind of
can't
response.
parcel that, we can't piece that together.
It's a little different, I'll say that. Is there the potential that it would be worth $1,000 a megawatt? It's possible, but that's pretty significant. And the net impact, the responses we're getting in these types of scenarios, especially like demand response, if we ask for people to curtail, we have a program where we spent $3.2 million. We've gotten 2.6 megawatts of response, and the best case scenario we've experienced so far is 1.6.
But I think what we found from evaluating that program is that the incentives are just not sufficient, right? And that's the main reason why
Sure.
people don't participate or they opt out, because they jump through all these hoops maybe to get a $50 gift card 12 months from now or something like that, right?
Sure. I think, one, it's a volunteer program, and they're incentivized and they have the ability to opt out, right? Two, because they can opt out, if you don't feel comfortable one day or you've experienced 3 days in a row where people are going to cut you, they say, you know what, I feel like the air conditioner should stay on today. And I think one of the trigger points on this is that it doesn't seem to be, money doesn't seem to be the incentive. Sure, if I was going to give you $1,000 to give me an hour without your power on, you'd probably take it. I don't think we could do that on the scale of the number of residents we'd have to hit during that hour to make it effective.
And I understand we may not be able to get 25 megawatts, but if we got 1 megawatt and we could only then have to buy 24, is that worth doing, or does it have to be 25 or nothing?
Well, no, I mentioned 25 because that's usually the size buy if you're going to go out to the market and buy it, right? There might be some small benefit to it. It's a little hard to say on that scale, right? I mean, I don't want to speculate through this whole thing, but $1,000 for 1 megawatt, are we spreading that over how many systems? Like I said, the best we've gotten is 1.6 response. If we had spent $1,000 for that 1 hour, that might have been worth it.
Well, I think we have an opportunity to look ahead on this, and I don't think we have enough time before September to set up a whole bunch of new virtual power plants and incentive systems. But I would at least like to mention ahead of time that is something that would also help us through this. If we had a robust system to get voluntary demand response, that would help us during these peak days, right?
Sure.
I mean, we could add that to the stack
Yeah.
if it was sufficient and if it was reliable enough, right?
Yeah, I'd say in general, we're looking for all the tools we can to keep in our tool belt to respond.
Okay. So yeah, however, I think there's a consultant-driven process going on now to evaluate these things. Just want to try to connect the dots that's not just a green feel-good activity. That is part of our power supply and reliability commitment. And the alternative is that gap between the red line and the colored boxes, which is non-voluntary blackouts, right?
Yeah, I do not want to go through the situation where we switch from volunteer to victim.
So how, since there is a reasonable possibility that happens this summer, how does that work? Like, how do we decide when, who, where gets cut, and how do we kind of manage that process?
So there's several things that go on a system before we decide we have to cut, including initiating an emergency response with LA, and seeing if they have available generation they can provide to us or available resources that they can provide to support it. If after we go through all those hoops, we have no other option but to cut load, we would do it on an hour-to-hour basis. We would change feeder to feeder. Not any one individual would experience an outage longer than 1 hour is our usual capability, but also under those criteria, there's a specific amount of generation or a specific amount of load we have to clear. If we're short by 10 megawatts, we got to find 10 megawatts to shed. So the more power we have to shed, the more feeders have to be cut.
And the feeder level, that's the lowest, most granular level of control that we can do in that scenario?
In our system, yes.
And how many feeders are there throughout the whole system? 20 something? 100?
About 105 feeders.
Okay. So that seems like a pretty crude way to switch things on and off, right? I mean, obviously not ideal, right?
Yeah, no, it isn't, but usually when you're in one of those events, granular is not what you're looking for. You're looking for an instant response, and you have to curtail enough to maintain your intertie with your neighbor. In our case, with Burbank and LA. So it's, as much as I do appreciate the granularity approach, usually when you're getting into these conditions, you're more focused on the broad sweep.
Sure. And what happens to somebody who's served by one of those feeders that rotates off for an hour or two if they have like medical equipment or something like that? Do they generally have battery backups? Do they get special advance notice? Doesn't seem like we could turn off the whole feeder but keep their house energized.
Not generally. There are, I mean, Dan could probably speak to this better, but as I recall, there are feeders that are identified with those special customers on it. We tend to try and avoid them, but we also do recommend that people who have severe conditions, they also should have some form of backup to ensure that they don't have to experience that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of the process, right?
Sure.
If we're running our system as lean, and I'm saying as lean to that wire, as we are likely going to be doing in the next few years, we are going to have to go through the recommendation process for anyone who has critical needs like that they may need to adopt scenarios where they have backup supplies.
And it seems like given the situation and circumstance this year, like it's prudent to prepare for that. Like that's not a,
Yes.
not a crazy idea, right?
No.
So do we know who those customers are in our customer information system? Like could we do an outreach to people who we know have medical equipment and say, hey, this might be a tough summer, make sure you get a battery backup, or, you know, how can we help people prepare for that?
People are usually in that kind of dire strait, have already considered that. I believe that's part of our process, though. We have identifying those individuals. If we're aware of them, we will definitely let them know what the conditions are.
Okay.
So, but yes, if there are people who are under that type of situation, they should be aware of their condition and should plan for possible scenarios like that.
Sure. Yeah. And I think hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Absolutely.
And it seems like this is a situation that we've all created by other decisions to pivot Grayson's output and structure.
Yes.
And we're living with the consequences, and we have to manage through it. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys coming at it, but I think we should be more direct. You know, maybe I'm not a lifer in this business, but I feel like somebody who was just watching at home probably wouldn't have put two and two together that, like, you know, rolling blackouts are quite possible or maybe even likely this
Yes.
summer. So let's just be real direct and straight with people. It's not scary. It's something that we just need to get the word out about.
And just to that point, at pretty much every community meeting that I've been in so far, I've expressed my concern about the possibility for rolling blackouts and the idea that we have work to do in our system in order to incorporate some of these more complex ideas like distributed energy resources. Because We have a system that was built over 100 years ago, and it was built to flow energy in a singular direction. With these new distributed energy resources, energy has to flow in multiple directions. We have multiple load cases, and we still have to build and maintain the system with safety. So, such is life right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good time to think about the reliability benefits, not just the green benefits of some of these new technologies, whether it's, you know, we talked about when we incentivize electric vehicle chargers, if they're connected to the web and the utility can shut them off,
Yes.
rather than shutting off a whole feeder, we shut off all of the electric car charging in certain areas. Like maybe that's a less impactful way to solve our problem, right? So
It is.
things like that, I think we should continue to explore.
And we are looking at those type of technologies and making them available. When and do we have something built out like that and can incorporate that, that would likely be one of the first things we would shed long before we get to the feeder level.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
No problem.
I think that's it. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to add, though, that I can say that this would be the worst year that we would have, like the summer, but for summer, because next year we are anticipating to have Shoal Canyon to be online, and then and then the following year we would have the Grayson Power Plant as well as the battery.
So if we can make it through this summer, things will get better.
That's we're hopeful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valdez. The next item is capital programs, which I will be covering. So for the record, my name is Adriana Isayan. I am the AGM overseeing risk and finance for Glendale Water and Power. And we've prepared a high-level view of the CIP projects that are in GWP. Starting with the group of projects that we've identified as projects for electrification, distribution, and transmission. These are just basically projects that share a common goal of EDT. Starting with the first one, substation improvements. This is an ongoing program to replace and update aging and undersized circuit breakers throughout Glendale Water and Power substations. This includes the airway substation improvements with the LADWP contract. The second project is a pole replacement program. This is an ongoing program to replace deteriorating poles at the rate of about 125 poles per year. Poles to be replaced are identified based upon the results of field inspections. And this is a life cycle replacement that goes above and beyond anything that would have required an emergency repair or anything that was touched because of wireless communication needs and that sort of thing. So this is an annual, replacement program. The next item is a T&D inspection program. This is inspection of T&D assets, so transmission and distribution assets, including poles, vaults, and an ongoing maintenance and repair schedule associated with the electric service master plan. The next project is cable replacement. This is replacing more than 20,000 feet of aging underground feeder cables, part of an ongoing program to improve reliability and reduce energy losses on distribution feeders and transmission lines. The next project is the 4 kV to 12 kV feeder upgrade program. This is again an ongoing program to upgrade GWP's distribution feeder from 4 kV to 12 kV. As we know, operating at a higher voltage reduces energy losses and it reduces stress on existing cables, reducing the likelihood of cable failures. The next project is the Glendale Water and Power Solar Design Build Program. This is a clean energy program to install solar panels on city-owned properties. For 24-25, the plan is to add solar panels at the Central Library roof and the Glendale Water and Power Building, and then to address 2 parking lots, the GCC Lot 34 and the UOC, the Utility Operations Center. Looking at substation transformer replacement, this is a project to replace aging substation transformers for 24-25. The substation transformers to be replaced are the Western number 5 and Howard number 1. The next project is transmission line upgrade program from 34.5 kV to 69 kV. This transmission line upgrades to support the planned electrification of the B line transit fleet and to accommodate the new projects with anticipated increased load demands due to electric vehicles. And finally, upgrading, replacing about 9,000 electric meters. This project will fund the annual upgrade replacement of about 9,000 Itron AMI electric meters to the Power Edge computing platform. So this is a 1/10 of the inventory. There's about 90,000 total meters, so it's a 10-year plan replacing 9,000 meters annually. So these are some examples. These are the major projects within this category. Looking at other electric capital projects that are significant include the fiber optic. This is extending the fiber backbone to the Shoal Canyon facilities and establishing a fiber connection with Pasadena, the Mirador Tower. Looking at the next project, LCFS program infrastructure. This is low carbon fuel standard program for installing charging stations for across different locations in the city. The next project, PM Biogas Renewable Project. This project will install 4 gas generators, gas engine generators, along with a landfill gas cleanup system with the purpose of capturing and incinerating the existing landfill gas and capitalizing on the renewable energy byproduct. This will generate about 11 megawatts of non-intermittent, locally generated electricity, which is enough to power over 11,000 homes using reliable, renewable energy. Grayson, Wartzilla, and the repower services. Demolition is complete on Grayson. Soil improvements are planned to be completed in August. And construction is expected to start in September, and the project is scheduled to be completed in summer of 2026. Looking at some customer-paid projects with enhancements, permitting, and electrical services. These are projects wherein we're addressing and helping and assisting with ADUs, photovoltaic solar, EVs, electrical upgrades to new and existing homes and businesses. And this is customer-driven when they're trying to build an ADU or trying to upgrade their electrical systems and such. Those are also planned in the budget for 24-25. Looking at water capital projects, well maintenance. This will rehabilitate existing groundwater wells in the San Fernando and the Verdugo basins. Pump station improvements. This will replace pump and motor and electrical equipment in pump stations. For 24-25, this will complete the design for the Allen Pump Station and Chevy Chase 1810 zone improvements. Tank and reservoir maintenance. This is an annual program. It's aimed at replacing 2 reservoirs a year. And pipeline replacement projects is another annual program, and it's aimed at replacing 1 to 2 miles of piping a year. Grandview Ammonia System Upgrade Project. This will replace the dated ammonia system at Grandview Pump Station. And looking at water quality enhancements, this program will provide water quality improvements to the system to meet regulatory requirements. For 24-25, the plan is to procure 2 new chloramine residual control system at Diedrich Reservoir and the Glorieta Park Pump Station. And finally, water AMI endpoint replacement. The endpoints is the part of the AMI system that allows the transmitting of meter reading information to and from the customer, so it's an important piece. And this project is replacing about 35,000 endpoints on water meters. That concludes my overview of the major projects in GWP. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and so are all of the AGMs are in the audience waiting to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
No questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, sure.
So I do have a couple of questions. The Power Edge computing platform, where we're upgrading the 9,000 electrical meters. So what is that platform? Maybe we can explain, get an understanding of it. How's it gonna benefit us?
Hello, Commissioner, Water and Power Commission members, President Fay, Member Kadikian. The meter system that we use at Glendale Water and Power is an automated meter infrastructure which reads the meters remotely. We're approaching 10 years of service. What happens is that the equipment becomes obsolete. Software isn't supported, hardware isn't supported, so therefore we have to go to the next generation of meters. And that's what this plan is, to eventually go to the next generation of meters so that we can still be getting the information into our customer system and the status of our customers as well. So that's what this plan is.
Are we getting any improvements or enhancements on this second generation?
Yeah, one of the enhancements is that on the original system, not only did you have the electronic meters that would get the information and talk to a communication system and then get back into the customer service and billing system, the next generation will use the meters themselves to become the communication network. They will make the communication grids by the meters. So you don't need a separate telecommunication system as a backbone. So that's one of the enhancements. The meters themselves become the communication device.
So wirelessly, 5G,
Yeah,
4G,
everything's
that
wireless
kind of thing?
now, but you have to have a backbone communication system to get all the information into our office or to our back office system to get into the customer services, to get into billing.
Okay.
But now the meters themselves make the communication network.
Okay. I don't have about, well, I did want to suggest something. So often I drive on the 134 and it takes into the 5, and you get an aerial view of Grayson and all the constructions that's happening over there. Now, because I'm on the commission, I'm curious, and I'm always looking, what's going on here? You know, I think it would be beneficial if periodically you guys present something like, well, look, there was this building here, and now we demolished it, and here's all this stuff. Put a couple of slides up there, get the public engaged in that process, and then later on, if you're going to be drilling the pylons or whatever it is, you know, put a drone picture of them drilling the pylons, and this is where we are in the stage of the production. I think this way the public gets engaged in the process. They see where their dollar is going. They'll see progress coming along. And maybe if they're driving over that crossover on the freeway, they'll peak. Hopefully no accidents, but you know, I was just curious. I think it's a suggestion that you might want to consider.
It is a good suggestion, and actually, it's a great view. If you get a chance to go under the freeway or over it, you can see it. Scott Millen, AGM Power Management. Unfortunately, right now, it's basically dirt. So we can show you, we actually have some camera video footage of the life of the demolition that we can bring to commission. And it's about a 30-second run. We have 3 different views. We can show you what it took to get where it's at now. It's kind of unremarkable to see the DSM work. It's basically some big drilling units, and you just see them standing there, and they're just drilling in the ground, and they pour concrete at different layers under the earth. But we can show you pictures of those drilling units. Most have been removed from site. There's only a couple left because we're coming down towards the end of that DSM work now.
I mean, nerds, geeks like me are interested in that kind of stuff. Maybe our public is interested in that. And I think especially if you can put before, after, just we can show there was a building and now it's all demolished.
Yes.
So even if it's just dirt, we got
And
something.
I'm one of those geeks. So,
Okay.
no, thank you for the recommendation.
I don't have any other questions.
Just to follow up on that, you know, I think that there was a lot of Grayson webpage public information that went out during the approval process and the consideration. Maybe just to follow through and continue providing construction updates and photos through that same website. It's probably not as exciting. It's probably not as many people visiting that website today as there were a couple of years ago. But for all of us nerds, it might be nice to just check in and make that video available for everyone to see. And at some point, once the construction happens and there's something to hang a banner on, maybe a big banner that says, your new clean energy power plant coming soon or something like that. So. On the electric meter replacement, I had another follow-up question for Mr. Scorza. So these are replacements that are required because the old system is end of life, right? And they have some improved functionality. Are they being deployed kind of feeder by feeder or zone by zone so that we can turn off the previous generation's backbone network?
Yeah, President Fay, the meters themselves, what we're doing is we're keeping them alive as long as it takes to do the conversion. So we do work with Itron to make sure that the older systems still compatible. To change all 90,000 meters would be a big task. So we're working sort of methodically. The other thing was that we were plagued also with the supply chain issues. I think a time came when we were going to do this, there was a problem with Itron providing the meters themselves. So we'll work with them. It is sort of an end-of-life issue. This is one of the issues going with these new technologies, is that they don't last as long as the old electromechanical meters, which would last 30, 40, 50 years. These, every 10 to 15 years, would have to be upgraded. So for utilities, it's a big issue. So, but we are working towards that end. It may not necessarily be an Itron system. We're also trying to see if there's other vendors. Otherwise, it's a monopoly. Itron is probably the biggest player in this sector of AMI meters across most utilities. So
we're doing 9,000 this year, and this is the first batch of 9,000. Is the
Yes.
idea that we do 9,000 each year for the next 10 years, or at some point we accelerate, or is this like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, where as soon as you fix the last one, you go back and you do the generation 3? How does it work?
Yeah, well, in general, that's what, ideally, you would want to do 90,000 meters, but again, we have to see what vendors will come back when we do an RFP. We may not go with Itron if there's an alternative. So we're still working on it. This is sort of a placeholder for that type of work that we need to do, because we know these are becoming obsolete. So, and again, most utilities kind of know this, that's going to happen, but the hope was that industry would have evolved where company meters from different vendors would be compatible with your system. Here, it's all proprietary. The meter, the
not-
communication system, the back office software is only from one company.
They're not going to do that on their own. So
Yeah.
if that's what we want, I would suggest that we, maybe as a consortium with Public Power, or we probably don't have enough juice as one utility, but collectively, if that is something that would make this more efficient or help save money, I think we ought to push for that and establish some standards in our RFPs that say, whatever we buy has to be interoperable with other vendors. And it seems like there's a reason for a monopoly in the old generation where there's a central, communications backhaul. But if all these new devices have their own LTE connection, it seems like you could have a hodgepodge of different meters all over the city, and they're all communicating back to headquarters.
Yeah, I would suppose that the communication system, that the communication grid that they would create would also be proprietary to the meter system. That's one of the things they would do. So, but the technology of using meters as the communication grid, that's something that's new out there that most vendors will be trying to do, so that it shows the next advancement of these meters. So
we budgeted for this, but we haven't put out a procurement
yeah,
or specs
we're
or
still
anything.
working on the procurement part with an RFP and see what's out there. We did run into the problem. Originally, it was going to be with Itron, but there was a supply chain issue. They couldn't provide the meters. So,
Well, yeah, I think if we're embarking on what might become a 10-year project, we definitely don't want to get stuck with a, regulatory capture or vendor capture type relationship. So,
yes.
I don't know what opportunity we have to review that or work with industry consortia, but I think we should really strongly require that this is an open architecture system to the extent that the industry offers something like that. That's the intent?
That sounds exactly what we were planning to look at, and thank you again for reinforcing that. That's
great.
That's good reinforcement. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just about the water tanks and reservoirs being replaced, which ones are the ones being replaced and how old are they? How big are they?
Yes, Chisholm Abigolo, Assistant General Manager of Water. So we try to replace about 5 tanks every 3 or 4 years. And that is, we do an assessment every single year. So currently we have a number. We are in the process of doing that assessment. And so we have not identified the ones that would go through the comprehensive replacement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
For some of these things where we're going to be working out in the field, whether it's replacing meters or tanks, I think it's really important that we make sure that the customers who live nearby these projects know what's going on. So if we're going to be going on a 9,000 customers' property and unplugging their meter head and doing that, like, do we send notifications in advance? Isn't that all normal stuff?
I'll take that one again.
It's
Yes,
softball, so go ahead.
So yes, we do go through a notification process. I think we actually hang flyers as we get closer to the day, but we have email, we have text, we have, all sorts of mechanisms to let people know whether or not they're going to be affected or remotely near an outage, planned or otherwise.
Great. I have a question for you, Ms. Asayan, about the pole replacement. This is more of like a finance planning strategy question. How long does a typical power pole last, or is there an industry standard of how long they're supposed to last? And kind of what I'm driving at is our replacement cycle more than the expected useful life of the pole, or less than? Are we keeping up, falling behind? How do we stand there?
I appreciate the confidence in me to answer that question, but Dan Scorza is the person.
Yeah, so Dan Scorza, AGM of Electric. President Fay, the power poles have different lives depending where they're located, but generally 60 years is what a normal power pole would last. But we go through the testing, inspection, T&D inspection. We're trying to identify where the problems are. We do have a history of the age of power poles. Those were the ones we would concentrate most on. But again, we had several initiatives as Adrien went through. The 4 to 12 kV conversion also looks at those poles. So during that process, we replace poles. So we do testing, inspections. As we do upgrades from 4 to 12, we also replace poles. So there is an opportunity to look at them and change them in case they do fail before the 60-year general accepted life. But this is something that all utilities struggle with. There is also an issue with supply chain. Poles, wooden poles are hard to get purchased. So we did get a shipment in, so we do have plenty of supplies for our projects, and we're looking forward to working with our vendors and replacing poles as we find them necessary to be replaced.
So I think what would be helpful for me in kind of my role here is like, what is a useful KPI or performance metric to see, like, is our capital plan for pole replacement good, bad? It just is. Is 125 the right number? Are we falling behind? Is there anything you guys can share that helps me understand that? Like, what is the average age of our poles? What's the right metric to assess whether our poles are older than Burbank's, or how do we make sense of this?
Yeah, in general, having come from LA GWP, LA has 320,000 poles. We have 15,000. Burbank has, I think, 12,000 poles. So it is a large number. And again, most utilities, and all being in the same supply chain issue, right now it's very difficult to probably reach the number that we would be very comfortable with. But it is something where some poles do last longer than the 60 years. So the inspection programs are very important. That's why we have that in there. We would go through them, make sure that the poles that do have issues are replaced. Do I wish I can change more poles? Yeah, always. But it's a balance in terms of making as best we can do with the resources we have and with the availability of the poles themselves, the infrastructure that you can purchase. Sure. So we do work on it. Yeah, it's in those ranges. It's big numbers of poles to get. Ideally,
Yeah, so
we would like to replace them all at age 60.
Right. So you shared a good number, 15,000 total poles, and if we're doing 125 a year, it would take 120 years to replace them all, right? So that would be double the expected life of the pole, right? So understanding that we're doing it on an as-needed basis with the most problematic poles first, it seems like if we continue at this pace long-term, like, the whole system's going to fall apart sooner or later. So I would suggest that 125 polls a year is probably not sufficient for what we need to be doing. And I understand that's the budget we have this year, but
Yeah.
you know, we're in a very long-term business here. So if we're only doing half of what we need to keep the system from falling apart, you know, we need to figure out a way to address that.
Yeah, and as I said, the other projects, 4 to 12 kV conversion also changes out poles. As we do inspections, we also change out poles. And then 125 is just the planned pole replacement.
So what do you think is like the net, how many polls do you think we get from those other sources?
So I think we're close to, I think I was going to share the number when I do the other presentation. It's 350 poles.
Okay, so all different
Yeah.
sources of pole replacements, we do about 350 a year?
Yes.
Okay, then we're on track.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then I had a question for Mr. Obigolu about the water meters. Is that a similar situation where the current ones are just 10 years old, they're old technology? We need to help us understand why now, and what are the issues with that?
Right, so it is very similar to electric. They have exceeded their life expectancy, which generally runs about 10 to 15 years. And so we are getting to the point where they're becoming obsolete and we're having to replace them.
Okay, and this is another 10-year project? We do a little bit each time?
Right, so as opposed to 90,000, we only have about 35,000 water meters. And so what we put out an RFP, and what we're looking at doing is sectionalizing it by city. It's better to have some that are replaced every 10 years, some that are replaced every 20 years, as opposed to doing a comprehensive replacement. And so that will be sectionalized and replaced, perhaps 10,000 at a time.
Okay, great. And while you're up here, I want to commend someone on your team who came out to my house on short notice on a Saturday. I had to do some irrigation work, and I didn't have a shutoff valve, and my main valve was stuck, and he came out with this very large wrench and helped me, and I was able to get my fix done. So very
Thank you,
good
President.
customer service.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe this question is for you. The CIP planning process. Are we doing this on a 1-year cycle? Do we have like a rolling 5 or 10-year cycle? What happens to all the projects that don't make the cut? They're kind of hanging out for next year. Like, how does that work?
So the CIP process is actually a 10-year budget process. What happens is annually that 10-year plan is visited. And so the immediate needs for that fiscal year are addressed with the plan for the outer years. So we have a CIP document that shows what the existing appropriation is for prior years, what's being proposed for the 24-25 fiscal year now adopted, and what are the needs 25-26 and onward for another 8 years. So altogether, it's a 10-year look at CIP. That plan is visited quarterly for budget updates. It's visited annually as a budgeting tool for looking ahead. And so it just comes down to priorities, staffing, what we can, what we could realistically cover for that year, because it's not just financial, it's staffing requirements, it's meeting contractual obligations and such. So it is a 10-year plan.
And what tends to be the tightest constraint on what we can accomplish? We only have so much money, we only have so many people, the supply chain issues.
It's all of it, actually. It comes down to what our immediate needs are: maintaining infrastructure, providing power, that kind of thing. So what are, kind of prioritizing what our needs are, addressing what should be addressed first, and then thinking about things that have, some things can't be accomplished in 1 year. Most projects, CIP in nature, are not annual projects. They are, they have a life cycle of 2-3 years sometimes, and even more, like the Grayson project. And then you have the annual ones where it is annual pole replacement, reservoirs, and putting targets that keep infrastructure and keep CIP needs of, meeting regulatory requirements, that kind of thing. So it's budgeting is looking at everything and all the challenges.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you guys have to distill a lot of information for us in these slides, but it would be helpful maybe just as background or as an attachment to include the 10-year kind of look ahead.
Sure.
To kind of see what that looks like next time.
Very good feedback. We will. Thank you.
Any other questions on this one?
No, everybody would get the same service from GWP, not just commissioners.
Oh,
Just
they had
clear
no
that up
idea.
over there.
They had no idea who I was. I made sure I was a secret shopper. But I was very impressed. All right, thank you very much.
So the next item is the wildfire mitigation plan, and Dan Scorza, our AGM, is here to do a presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Dan Scorza, Assistant General Manager, Electric. And I have the, okay, thank you. I have the pleasure to go over our wildfire mitigation plan that the department implements and gets approved every year. On our system, so start here. So the objective of the wildfire mitigation plan is to engineer, construct, maintain, and operate GWP's electric transmission and distribution system in a manner intended to minimize the risk of catastrophic wildfires caused by electrical lines and equipment. Every year, by July 1st, the updated wildfire mitigation plan is submitted to the state of California in the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety, the Wildfire Advisory Board. The major changes for the 2024 include accomplishments since 2023, table of contents update, budget update, vegetation management updates, and then a summary of the accomplishments. So we'll go into the slide presentation. So what you see here is just a real quick presentation. This original plan was first submitted in 2019, so in 2024. Every 3 years, we do a major upgrade as the Wildfire Advisory Board comes up with new requirements. We make sure that we do meet those requirements, and we have a third-party outside consulting company that would review our work and then give a recommendation letter that's also presented to the Wildfire Advisory Board. Let's go on the next slide. Oops. Is it here? Okay. So GWP uses the CAL FIRE threat map assessment. The wildfire, CAL FIRE's threat map assessment shows the tier 2, tier 3 zones. We use the map to identify, and then we put GWP's infrastructure that's associated with that area on the map, and then we also show where our infrastructure is, and then our plan reviews all that information. And we work also with the Glendale Fire Department's Vegetation Management Program, where they do where they work with residents and businesses in the wildfire risk zones to clear areas of vegetation and brush. By applying that information, we end up with our map here. Okay. So you can kind of see the CAL FIRE map on the left, and then we impose it on Glendale. And then as we did that review, only 0.47 of the total city's area has infrastructure that's in tier 2, tier 3 zones. And those are the high fire threat zones. Okay. So here's some of the accomplishments that we've done towards mitigating wildfire risks. As I said before, the number of poles we replaced in total, 354 throughout the city, including the poles in tier 2 and tier 3. We've also replaced 151 transformers within the city, including tier 2 and tier 3. And here's an important aspect of it. We've also trimmed 8,000 trees in this specific only to tier 2 and tier 3, and I'm sorry, it doesn't say that on the slide. But we normally do 13,000 trees annually throughout the city where we do the trimming. And I'll talk about the trimming, how we do that in a later slide. And then all the other inspections we do. And next slide here. Okay. So some of the strategies that we use are, we use technologies such as covered conductors. So instead of having bare wires on our overhead distribution system, we use covered conductors that have insulation on top of them. We also use fire-resistant poles. those are just some of the strategies that we use in the Tier 2, Tier 3 zones. So the preventative strategies include GWP's vegetation management program. Our crews do patrols to make sure that as they go through areas, there is no vegetation intrusion into our distribution and transmission lines. As part of our 4 to 12 kV reconstruction project, we rebuilt our overhead circuits to increase the conductor spacing, and also includes replacement of poles and cross arms that need replacement because of aging or deterioration. We also implement new technologies. There's something called a fuse saver, that it's a protective device that doesn't cause an arc to occur when it protects a feeder. But we also use something else called a falling conductor detection protection. What this is a high-speed protective device that de-energizes a transmission line, in our case, before the conductor would touch the ground. And this is a newer technology. So we've implemented it on our 34.5/69 kV line that goes over the Vertigo Mountains. That was tested, and it's gonna be active before next month. And it's a newer technology, and it's something that we look forward to having in there because it is a very good use of new technologies that are meant to protect infrastructure and prevent wildfires from occurring. We also do an evaluation of our plans. We tabulate all our information to make sure that we have the numbers of the where we've implemented our changes and put in new equipment. Next slide. Okay. So in our tree trimming program, so our GWP vegetation management budget is about $2.8 million. That's what we use annually. And one of the things that we do is that we trim around the lines. And what you see in the diagram there, where it says primary, that's where you have your 12 kV and 4 kV power lines. GO 95 only requires us to have 18 inches of clearance. But at GWP, we are aggressively trimming. Our trees, we have a minimum of 6 to 10 feet around the power line conductors. Depending on the species and how fast some trees grow, we will trim them more often. Normally it's an annual review or an annual cutting or trimming, but we would trim them much quicker if they are fast growing. And then we also cut the lines down to the communication line level. You see the line where it says communications. We trim the trees below to that level or below. And where it says secondary lines, that's where our 120, 240 volt services are. That's what comes into your house. And it's also showing a service wire. So in general, this is one of our bigger strategies that we use. And then next slide. And as I mentioned, our plan is reviewed by a third-party reviewer every 3 years. And that's when we do the major updates, depending on what the recommendations are from the Wildfire Advisory Board. And that we ensure that we're in compliance with the PUC Section 8387, which requires us to have a plan in place that does the wildfire mitigation. And that's it. And if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
Thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
And neither do I. So thank you very much, Mr. Scorza. So I think that concludes item 4. And our last item today is adjournment. Any other business before we wrap up? Okay. Well, then at 5:21, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned by?
Oh, excuse me.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
And we're still adjourned at 5:21. Thank you.